I'm Jim Kunkel, and welcome to Coatings Talk. I've got a really great interview with some great people today. We're going to be talking about talent that protects assets, recruitment strategies for the coatings and corrosion industries. And joining me today are the Dragonfly partners of Amy Richardson and Susan Daniels. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
So, Amy, why don't you go ahead and start off, introduce yourself, explain what you do, and also to let everyone get to know you a little better.
Yeah, sure. So we are the Dragonfly partners. Susan and I set the business up 7 years ago, and it was basically a call for us to provide talent to clients on a retained basis, but with a guaranteed delivery. So we were hearing from clients all the time that they were just struggling to find the right talent, wanted the correct resumes, and they weren't getting what they needed. So we decided to put together a business that essentially helps them fill those needs. And one of the specific areas and industries we work in is within coatings. So we've made a number of placements with a number of large firms in the industry and continue to do so. We'll also be exhibiting at AMP next week.
Yeah. And Susan, anything that Amy didn't mention that needs to be mentioned?
Probably lots.
So the Dragonfly Partners, we were formed in 2019. But prior to that, Amy and I had both worked within the recruitment sector for longer than we would care to admit. But let's just say between us, we have over 40 years combined experience, all predominantly within oil and gas, energy, manufacturing, and industrial services.
Perfect. And for full disclosure, I want everyone to know that I also had the opportunity to work with both of them through a recruitment process, and they were both wonderful 24/7, 365 days. I was even traveling internationally, and they were communicating with me all the time. Love the both of you so much.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure if we were going to be talking about that today.
Well, people were probably going to want to know the connection and why you're on Coatings Talk. So I think it's important to bring that up.
We appreciate you, Jim. Thank you.
We'd like everybody to be as easy to work with.
I agree. This broadcast is brought to you by Apelix Drone Solutions, who are the leaders in robotic spray painting technology for industrial coatings. If you're an industrial painting contractor or an asset owner looking to boost productivity, improve safety, and deliver more consistent coating results on vertical structures, it's time to take a serious look at spray painting drones from Apelix. These aren't consumer drones. They're purpose-built, engineered industrial drones to solve real field-level challenges and support your bottom line, as well as provide you additional revenues and profits with the use of drones. Apelix spray painting drones allow your crew to apply liquid coatings to elevated or hard-to-reach surfaces without ever stepping onto scaffolding or lifts. That means fewer safety risks, fewer delays, and dramatically lower setup cost. And because the drone maintains a precise standoff distance and travel speed, you get uniform film builds, reduced overspray, and repeatable quality across every pass. Imagine completing a tank exterior, a stack or a tall structure in a fraction of the time, with a smaller focused crew safely on the ground managing the operation. That's the power of Apelix. It's not replacing painters, it's augmenting your production, giving your team a smarter, safer, more efficient way to work. If you want to improve margins, show that you're an innovator and deliver higher quality results with smaller labor demands. Apelix spray painting drones are the competitive edge you've been waiting for. Just email me at jim@procoattech.com to learn more about Apelix and discover how drone-applied coatings can transform your next project. Let's open up. Let's talk about why talent is now a critical asset, especially related to the coatings and the corrosion industries. And what I want to open up with is, both sectors, both sides, let's say, of coatings and corrosion, because technically they are two separate industries, but they're like a coin. They're different sides of the same coin, but they do kind of operate independently in some cases. but also dependently with each other as well. But both sides are really struggling when it comes to workforce recruitment, and there's heavy retirements that are happening because you have a lot of subject matter experts. You got people that work in the field, who work in the lab, who work, or practical and professionals that are retiring. And also, too, what we're seeing is this big emphasis on a lot of aspects of corrosion related to infrastructure, be it pipeline, power. It doesn't matter what sectors there are. Corrosion is just so pervasive. It's really kind of growing both sides of coatings and corrosion industries as well. So that's also reshaping the hiring needs. Both of you are out there all the time, like I say, looking at the recruitment side of it. What are some of the things that you're seeing when it comes to both industries and workforce challenges, especially related to the shortages and the retirements and everything?
Yeah. So I'll take this one, Amy. I started. So the issues that we're seeing both within the corrosion and coating space are really, really also reflective in the operators and end users that we've seen too. With this big, we've got this big skills gap. Everybody needs somebody within the 15 to 20 year category. And unfortunately, because of where a lot of the markets were, when those individuals were graduating school or starting out their career, we've got this just gulf of nothingness, which means that we've got people that are either retiring or we're dealing with people that are early career level. And we've noticed that that's really shifted and changed how people are hiring too. So we're seeing a much more of an emphasis on people's technical skills and knowledge, and less of a reliance on some of the institutional knowledge and relationship driven sales, for example. We're seeing it's changing the whole landscape of not just only staffing, but how coatings companies are meeting their client where they're at. It's become much more sort of strategic and technical, and a little less grounded in relationships and the status quo. Similarly, we're seeing a rise in the amount of needs within the likes of the municipality spaces, power and utilities. There's going to be a big tick up in LNG work as well that we're already seeing staffing for. And there's going to be a continuous war for talent. And what we're hearing from companies is that because the technologies and the products are moving and developing at a breakneck speed, they're having to actually hire more for mindset more than they ever have done. Because if you hire for the products and services that you're providing today, you're going to be out of date 3 months from now regardless. So it's become really key that the cultural and the human piece of things, which has been really interesting, because with the fact that we are working within a technical industry, the rise of AI, you think that things are moving away from it, but it's meant that the more human elements have become more important than ever. And people are going to be assessing cultural fit and mindset and the ability to maneuver, pivot into new industries, work within new tools, just because it's going to be a constantly evolving landscape.
Perfect. And I appreciate you covering that widening gap, because that is really, a critical aspect. A lot of times when I have, someone who might be younger than myself as a young professional, and they're asking questions, and I say to them, listen, you've got to, continuous improvement. You've got to be learning about your craft, your trade, learn about everything aspect of it, because ultimately what you're trying to do is make yourself even more marketable, because anymore in a company, you don't get the job when you're in your 20s and you retire from the same company. And so you need to be able to market yourself, but also to make yourself very desirable when it comes to a hire as a technical person. Like you said, as a salesperson, you have to be able to influence, to be able to kind of win deals and things like that. But if you're really looking for any type of career progression, You've got to be continuously improving yourself. Let me, Amy, let me ask you this question. When it comes to companies, what do they risk when their recruitment strategies lag behind what the market realities of today are?
I think we work to certain timeframes, and we find that whenever it's very clearly defined and processes are clear and key and all decision makers are on board, that de-risks the process, because ultimately the quicker that you can keep the momentum and move somebody through those processes, the more likely you are to secure them from a talent perspective. You've got to understand, if there's a high commodity or a very in-demand individual, they're probably going to have multiple offers and multiple opportunities, and they're going to have been tapped up for probably 6 months prior. So we need to work with clients who are all on board at the same time. Everybody that needs that resource understands that they need the resource, why they need the resource. Everybody is aligned on the job description. We see a lot of fallout when individuals get to interview stage, and it's very clear that the panel are not necessarily aligned. So that needs to happen right at the start. So in order to minimize that risk, that is the first stage that we always advise clients on doing, so that they are able to be clear. And it also makes the companies therefore look like they are moving with intent. They're making quick decisions. They're aligned, because you've got to understand that that interview is a candidate's first impression of how that company operates. So they see the values, they see the speeds, they see the ability to make quick decisions. They see how easy it's going to be to navigate those individuals as their potential leaders. So they're also seeing this, and it's the first, opportunity for them to assess that.
Very good. And I think for the next section, the segment I'd like to talk about is, looking at modern recruitment landscape. A lot of times myself, I fall into this trap where I think, before the pandemic and then post-pandemic, and, you look and you see a lot of differences. And I'm really curious when it comes to the executive and the technical hiring, has there been an evolution post-pandemic when it comes to recruitment for these different types of responsibilities? Susan, what's your thoughts on that?
I'm not necessarily sure that there's been a huge amount of change in terms of how companies are going out to market to find candidates and then interview and assess them. But what we have noticed is that individuals now need to have a lot of strings to their bow. Before, it was fine for you to be comfortable on site, doing some spray tests, really just working your relationships, getting requisitions. Now you've got to be as comfortable with digital tools, engagement throughout your organization as well. We're seeing the roles become a little broader within their work scope, and expectations are definitely higher. So it's more important than ever that candidates and just employees generally keep that growth mindset and keep developing these additional strings to their bow to make them more marketable, both for internal opportunities as well as providing a bit of an insurance policy if anything were to change and they were to go back out. The role scopes across the board, whether it's in product management, sales, internal resource, they are becoming much broader in nature, and companies are more than ever looking at what the return on investment is for your seat. And especially if you're not in a overtly income generating position, it's really important that you're able to display the value that you're bringing on an ongoing basis.
Mm. And then, Amy, a question I have is related to the candidates that you work with, Susan works with, related specifically to coatings and corrosion, and maybe even some of those engineering roles. Maybe they're involved in asset integrity and things like that. When it comes to the candidates that are looking for roles within different companies out there, what are some of their values? What are they really looking for in a company?
That's a really important question. And I think that has changed, post-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest thing that Susan and I are seeing in the market is that candidates nowadays are prioritizing flexibility over anything else.
Absolutely.
So that looks like having autonomy, having purpose, being left to their own devices, not being micromanaged. And I think, the culture is so important to those candidates, because not only are they looking at that as a value, but also that in corrosions and coating specifically, that kind of translates to like, where can I solve the biggest problems? So they want to know that they're joining a company that is making good investments in technology. They want to know it's aligned with their sort of values. And the flexibility, I mean, we saw firsthand a situation where a candidate had two offers on the table. One was through us, one was not. The one that was not through us was in office full time. The one that we had was $30,000 less on a base salary, and they still picked our opportunity because it was flexible, it was remote. So we're seeing that is a huge driver. Yes, candidates like the hybrid model as well, because that gives them that opportunity to still have the group collaboration, the leadership mentor, piece. But the flexibility is so important that people are prepared to take a cut in salary to be able to have that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And earlier you had mentioned, maybe Susan might have mentioned this, talked about, with mindset, shift the mindset, everything like that. But also too, I think, at least in my experience, I feel like there's been a big shift towards skill-based hiring, and then also to people that could be very cross-disciplinary. They can be able to work across different teams or different roles within a structure itself. Am I correct in that assessment that skills are very big, and also being cross-disciplinary is also big?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So what we tend to find is that if a certification's required, that will get you through the door, but that doesn't get you the job offer anymore. You need to show how you're using it, what you're doing to add value off the back of that certification, how you collaborate across the other areas of the business as well, and how you're able to, parlay that into value. Whereas, if we go back to pre-pandemic era, a lot of the time, if somebody needed someone with a certain certification, we put it in, and if they were a nice enough person and they had it, they would get the job. That is no longer the case. It will open the door for you, but it definitely doesn't get you the offer. Especially since companies now aren't necessarily, we're in an ever-changing economic climate. People don't necessarily know what sector is going to be the most successful for them as an organization. So they want people that are true technical experts that are also confident enough to parlay that technical knowledge into a new environment. And that's the purple unicorn, as we call it. You can't just be technical anymore. It's not enough, unfortunately. Completely necessary, still very, very important. But on top of that, you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and looking at new ways of diversifying your skill set. And I just also wanted to pick up on the last part of Amy's question, that ties back a little bit to the skills gap. What we've noticed with people that are more early career, even though they're very technical, they tend to be looking for more purpose in their role and responsibilities than maybe some of the generations that have come before them. They really want to know how they're adding value. They want consistent feedback from companies with regards to how they're performing in their job, what the next steps in their career might be. And they're seeing their roles as much more of a sort of portfolio of experience rather than this linear career trajectory. So I think that ties in really nicely with what the market also needs right now, because it's providing opportunities for that.
When it comes to providing those opportunities, the next aspect I wanted to cover is what makes a candidate high impact in coatings and the corrosion industries. And for both of you, in looking at both sectors, coatings and corrosion. What are some of the core competencies that are being looked for when it comes to filling a leadership position, a project management position, a sales position, marketing, or maybe a technical role within a company? What are some of those core competencies that companies are looking for?
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah.
So I think we work with a number of different roles within the industry, but I'm going to take sales as the most common one that we are engaged on roles to work with clients on. And I think on that front, it varies, and it definitely depends on the company that we're being engaged by. But I think some of the core competencies are they need a technical background. So they need to have come and been in the field and been boots on the ground with some of these companies and the clients that this company is solving problems for. Obviously, the relationships are key. Somebody is always going to be interested in somebody that can bring, those relationships with them and those networks, because ultimately that's what takes the time. The business development is key. We hear the same thing time and time again from clients that they want hunters. They don't want farmers. So farmers and account management roles are somewhat easier to fill when it comes to, experience, because a company has already got those relationships. They're already doing business with those firms. So it's easier to be able to manage those accounts. But they want people that can break the door down. So we hear this again all the time. We need somebody that understands the plants, the petrochem facilities, the refineries. We want somebody who is relentless, hungry, they don't give up. And so I think if you combine that skill set with a technical background, that is the purple unicorn, essentially. Salespeople, we find, come from two different areas. They either come from a very technical background where they are, they've only ever done that, but by virtue of their knowledge, they can sell because they connect with people on a very technical level, or they haven't come from that technical background, but they understand the refineries, the plants, the petrochem facilities, and they're able to connect with those people very easily and build relationships. So it's hard. It's hard to find both. When you do, you've got a real asset there, and companies know that too. So they're holding on to those people very well. They're very well looked after. They are paid well. They're treated well. Occasionally you get somebody who is maybe in a larger firm that has become more of a number or a commodity and doesn't necessarily feel as valued or recognized. And that's where we tend to work very well with those individuals who have recognized that they need to make a move. They're not going to necessarily get to the next level of their career if they stay where they are. So they want to know what's out there. So they're coming to us with an overview of all of these clients saying, okay, this is what I know about these companies' reputations in the market. What do you know? What are people paying? So it's great intel for us because we get to figure out what are the push-pull factors that candidates are looking for, and what is going to determine that they will make a move. And then we're able to feed that back to clients that we're working with. So yeah, definitely that dual technical and ability to cultivate and hunt new relationships down.
And Susan, what say you about core competencies?
Oh, I think Amy covered a lot of it, but and I just keep banging the drum. I think that more than ever, people are looking for individuals to be able to quantify their experience and what they're bringing to the table.
Yeah,
the vagaries aren't working quite as well anymore. Budgets are lean. It's hard to get roles approved, particularly if you are essentially a cost center position rather than a profit center. So it's really important for candidates, and I would even strongly suggest people that are already incumbent and in the role to be able to quantify exactly what they're bringing to the table in terms of numbers, if possible, and if not, in terms of impact. It's almost impossible in this industry right now to float along and collect your paycheck, or everybody is looking at their bottom line. We're coming off the back of a year that was a little rougher than expected. Looking ahead, there's going to be lots of opportunity there, but nobody quite knows the timeline or which bucket it's going to come out of. Yeah. So with all of that in mind, I would just say, you need to look at yourself as not an employee, but as an asset a lot of the time, and look at what value you're delivering. And if you don't feel that you are, you need to maneuver yourself onto a project or a position where you can showcase your value, whatever function you're currently operating within.
Perfect. Amy, I'm going to ask you this question because it's very near and dear to my heart, and we had a great experience, working together on this. Is the importance of communication, digital fluency, and also adaptability when it comes to being able to express yourself and communicate properly. How important today in recruitment, in interviewing, and everything like that is communication, digital fluencies, and also the adaptability in dealing technologies. What are you experiencing out there and seeing out there?
I think it's massive, and I think it's the number one reason why an individual would be chosen for a particular position. We generally, so our model, whenever we are engaged on a search, is to provide our clients with 3 to 5 resumes in 7 working days. And out of those resumes, we will have spoken to those individuals, we will have profiled them, we would have put a summary together. And Susan and I have been doing this a long time. We know 99% of time which candidate will be picked by the client. And that's not because we are technical experts, but that's because we know from a communication standpoint, this is the one that is most aligned with what our client is looking for. And from a cultural perspective, this is the one that's most aligned with what they are going to want to join their firm. So I would say there's nothing, to be honest, more important than that. Yes, of course, you've got to come to the table with the technical knowledge, because that's huge. But we were talking to a client this morning, for example, who, she said to us, do you think I should interview all of these people that you've presented? And we'd presented 6 because we'd found a couple of extras. And we said yes. Although we were ranking them and benchmarking them and going through, which ones we thought were the top matches, it's always so surprising when you get a client that says, I actually didn't think much of this person on paper, but when I spoke to them, I realized actually they're fantastic for a role that we are looking for. So you've got to realize that communication it has to trump any resume, any summary, any background, because essentially that's what's making sure that you're aligned to that culture. And particularly when you're looking at recruiting for not just today, but for 3 years ahead, what's that going to look like? And how can that person convince you that they are the right pick for this position, not just today, but also in the future?
Yeah. And I also view too, communication, you have to really be an expert at this. A lot of times it's not what you know, it's how you say it. I hate to say it that way, but really it is, because you could be the world's smartest person and you just fumble all the time in communication. You're not going to instill confidence in that hiring firm or company. But a lot of times you can have someone who might be, they're knowledgeable, they're experienced and everything like that, but they might be considered off the resume on the margin, maybe, let's say, and their communication puts them over the line.
And I should also say that if you are not sometimes the absolute best technical people struggle with some of the elements of communication. That doesn't make them any less an asset. But I think it is really important that you recognize your own strengths and weaknesses. And if that isn't something that you're very strong at, you can figure out ways in this process to get ahead of it. So not everybody, the vast majority of people are not using recruitment companies. So the example that Amy just spoke to, where somebody will rely on our experience and skills and knowledge to say, look, give them a chance because of X, Y, Z. The vast majority of job seekers don't have that. They're representing themselves. They're maybe applying for a job. So how can you, warm up and get ahead of any communication potential issues? Well, one example is coatings and corrosion prevention. It's a very small world. Find somebody at that organization that will speak for you. This guy might take a minute to get warmed up, but I can assure you that he knows his stuff. Or connect with somebody on LinkedIn that's also in the same group as you. Utilize your AMP connections. you might not, might not feel confident in communicating, particularly in this sort of digital era. But there are a few baseline things that you can do to just help your candidacy and let people, give people the opportunity to get to know you during the process.
And Amy, earlier you had mentioned about, Dragonfly Partners, you have like an evaluation, a report you put together. Is there any, what's one of the most important evaluation aspects that you do that you provide a hiring firm or company?
Yeah, so when we submit resumes, we also submit a market report to that client. And the market report is a 2 to 3 page document that really we feel helps to inform the hiring process. And what it covers is everything from where we found those individuals, how many we approached, where they were, what companies they are currently engaged with, what their salary expectations are, what their background has been, the reasons that somebody would either choose to not make a move or make a move. It talks about competitor analysis. So it talks about what other companies in the same space, so particularly here in coatings or corrosion, are doing to either retain or attract talent. And it really is a very, very useful and informative document when clients are making a decision about, are we looking for the right type of person? Is this person out there? Are they available? What do we need to do to widen that talent pool? And it gives recommendations in that document for how we feel you could be successful at that. Sometimes it's not just based on budget. Sometimes it's based on location. It can be based on years of experience. It can be based on things that are happening in the market that are relevant. If there's a particular coatings or corrosion company that's doing mass layoffs or restructures, we would include that information to talk about why that would then be useful for the client that we're working with. So it's really just a very concise overview, but a solid overview of how, it backs up the data that we have brought to the table with these resumes.
Excellent. Before we get into talking about recruiting for specialized roles in coatings and corrosion, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I encounter. There are a lot of entrepreneurs that have, they've started a company, they have an existing company, some are legacy companies. They're small, let's say small players within coatings and the corrosion industries. And they're really looking at, I get asked a lot of times, how can I find a candidate or candidates to help me take me to the next level, to grow my business and everything like that. And some of the things I wanted to throw out here while we're talking about this is kind of focus in some areas. And I think the first area for a small company, a growing company, or a legacy company that's small and is looking to go to the next level, the first important thing is building a real compelling brand when it comes for your company, because you are working in a competitive industrial market. And I've recently had started using the terminology of big paint. A lot of times you have small formulation companies, manufacturers that say, I can't compete with the big guys out there. And I say, the way the industry is moving, you're moving into some really specialty, very unique type of coating formulations. And you also have a lot of owners that are looking for different types of technologies that get embedded into coating. So that first thing is having that you've got to have a strong brand that will compete. And I believe brands can compete. Small brands can compete against the big brands. I don't know if any of you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I can.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We were doing so well at not talking at the same time. You go first.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of it is down to product specifically. So when we're talking to candidates and we know that we've targeted the right individual because they're selling a competing product to the one that we're looking to hire for, they will come up against that product all the time or not. So one of the biggest indicators is, have they heard of that product? And therefore, it's the brand itself is massively important when it comes to that, because whenever we're talking to candidates that say, yes, I come up against that all the time, my clients don't like it because XYZ, they'll tell you reasons that product is less superior than theirs. Or they'll tell you, yeah, that's a really well-respected product in the industry, and I would be interested in working for a company that's selling that. So that is the key. And I know there's not a lot that can be done about that, but we've had situations where taking that feedback from candidates back to our client and saying specifically, here's why that product isn't considered that successful in the industry, and here's why they're having trouble selling it, and here's what my clients are saying about the reasons they don't want to use it. That, for example, has been included in a market report that we provided to a client, which they then took to their product development team to make modifications and actually improve some of the things that they're doing. So I think that is just an example where I think that the brand is important. And if they haven't heard of a brand, that is a bit of a red flag. So some of those smaller organizations, doesn't matter that they're small, but their product needs to be known, and it needs to be out there in the industry, and it needs to be competed against.
I also think that an employer brand is sort of really important. And I think that you're right, Jim. They can compete very, very easily, actually. There's a unique set of circumstances, and it really depends on where a company is going, as to how we frame it. We sometimes work with very small owner-managed companies, but they're at a really interesting point in their development, and they are they're working to either niche down, or maybe they're like leveling up and they're looking at getting a external investment to hit the next phase. And quite honestly, a lot of candidates find that compelling and more compelling than working for a big behemoth, because people ultimately want to add value. They want to feel like they're part of something. They want to have purpose in the work that they do. So there is always something there as far as a company goes, to be able to frame it for a potential employee and really make sure that you're matching up with the right one.
Yeah. And the other thing too, that a lot of, again, I'm not being real critical of entrepreneurs and small companies. I see a lot of times, like on LinkedIn, to give you a good example, they're posting, their ABC product. This is what it does, but they also don't really invest a lot of time and focus on positioning themselves as that small, emerging, the next generation company. And because of that, I think what a lot of times is they do miss out on some high caliber professionals, because they'll see, the company I work for Henkel here in the USA, and Henkel will put out a lot of posts related to people who work at the company and what we do and all these other things. That's got that human touch, that element of it. And so I recommend to a lot of the small emerging companies, you've got to put yourself out there too, to say, hey, we are the perfect destination for you as a professional. You should come work with us. Do you guys see the same thing that I'm seeing?
Yeah. 100%. And honestly, we see your current employee pool are your brand ambassadors. Mm-hmm. So if, there was one very small company that we made a business critical hire for, and everybody wanted to work for them, even though they were small, and it was particularly going to be, it might not be as stable on the surface or as safe. The benefits weren't going to be as good because they were small. But the guy that owned the company was highly respected in the industry. He was out there. He had strong relationships. He operated from a position of integrity and trust. And people are like, I want to work for that guy. And it can be as simple as that. Your current base, they are your brand strategy a lot of the time. And, we can talk about all the technical elements under the sun and how great a product is. But ultimately, if you're not building the relationships to get it put out or to build your bench of individuals in your company, it's pointless if nobody knows about it. So yeah, I would say that there's a multitude of ways that you can brand yourself to become a compelling story for somebody to want to come and work with you. And we've seen people do it to great success with very small companies, but then we've also seen So maybe, equity-backed firms that just think that, they can push a narrative out, but they're shouting into a void almost. And they don't progress in the way that you would expect them to because they are missing that key element that you spoke about, Jim.
Yeah, I think, and the other thing, the kind of to tie this down, another area too, related to, making, your company, your small company, your emerging company, a place for people want to come work, is you said that they might not be able to throw big compensation out, but what they can do with that is if they have the flexibility, if maybe there's opportunities for that individual to get, bonus structures, maybe even potentially have some type of buy-in into the company itself. And then, as you mentioned earlier, where the work-life balance, where you had someone take $30,000 less. So we know that a lot of times it's more about the quality, it's about the culture, it's about the career pathway than the dollar. Where if we look in the past, I remember back in the 80s and 90s, it was always about, I got to make X amount of money and I want to make more and more. It was about the money. Today is such a different day. But also, too, I think if there's a small company, if you can explain what your expectations are for your candidates and they are favorable and positive to what the market is asking for out there when it comes to labor and professionals, you should be able to do very well if you structure everything in accordance to what the trends are out there.
Yeah, and that's something that we actually help all of our clients with.
Nice.
Because, we'll go through their benefits, we'll benchmark them against industry norms. And it's like, right, well, what tools do you have in your toolbox to be compelling? Maybe you're going to help people invest in their continuing professional development. Maybe you will ensure that they can go get certifications, and you will support all of that. Perhaps it's increased PTO. Perhaps it's an equity component after a certain amount of years of service. It can be, there are lots of levers that you can push and pull during this. It's not quite as simple and as straightforward as salary alone anymore. And that's what makes it exciting for people like Amy and I, and probably quite frustrating for some clients when they're like, why is life not simple?
Yeah.
So let's get into recruiting for specialized roles in coatings and corrosion. Earlier, when we were in conversation, I can't remember, Susan or Amy, you were talking about, credentials and certifications and everything like that. How important are those today when it comes to, getting hired?
I think still are important, and there's certain roles that require them, right? It's because it's a credibility thing. So it's like a degree. There are clients that say, we need somebody with a degree. And then there's candidates that are excellent and haven't got a degree, but because of the way that company is maybe structured or the value and the mindset of how important those things are, then they're discussed. So I think there are certain roles, particularly, if you're going to be a subject matter expert, it's essential. If you're going to be in sales, probably not, although a lot of our clients still ask for NACE certified individuals in sales positions, because again, it gives them that credibility in the field. I think it depends on the position. And again, you're looking at a total package when you're looking at a candidate. You're not just looking at their technical skill set and their background. You're looking at, the cultural fit, the ability to do what that role needs to do. So I think it's everything. I think our job is to make sure that we're listening to our clients, we're understanding exactly what they need in that first job description. And if they ask for certifications, we bring them candidates with those certifications. But we would never discount somebody who we felt was a strong asset just because they didn't necessarily have those same things, but they had other things. So I think it's going to be the best candidate will always be a cross section of all of those things, if possible. But yeah, we see both sides.
Yeah, and if you do have two candidates that have got the same credentials and one of them has a certification, they're going for that candidate a lot of the time. I think it shows a commitment to keep progressing. It shows a depth of knowledge. So it's one of those, we would never discount anyone, but we do find that if we submit 2 candidates, they're going for the one that's got the certification, because it tells them a lot about that person before they've even met them.
Yeah. Don't hold this against me, both of you. In my professional lifetime, I've had the opportunity to work with other headhunters and recruiters and things like that. But what I can say, and I'm going to share this with everyone, working with Amy and then also to Susan as that connection with the Dragonfly partners, is that what I was amazed with is the interview processes. The process that I went through was much more really concentrated. It was a quicker turnaround than I've ever experienced before, successfully or unsuccessfully with others. The thing that I found amazing is you were talking about the report you do. You really did a lot into really trying to understand my technical depth, also to my experience in the field, especially related to the role. But also what I liked, you asked a lot of questions when it came to trying to understand who I am as a professional. And that was, I think you were trying to get that cultural, is he going to fit in this organization? Like here's what they are. He's just like they are. And obviously for me, it was a huge success because everything in the aspect of the technical side, the experience when it comes in the field, and also with a cultural fit, even with it turning into, us rolling into a larger entity called Henkel. I really appreciated you guys doing that, because I think that was important for not only my employer, but also me as a candidate going into that process.
Yeah, I'm glad. That's good. I think the interesting thing with your placement was that we knew already that the acquisition was going to be happening, but it hadn't necessarily happened yet.
Yes.
So there was a bit of a double conversation there. It was like, right, you're going to join a smaller firm who are little, and these are the ways that they make decisions. This is their culture. But at some point, it's going to become much larger. So it's actually it's a tricky one with that, because a lot of the times we're talking to candidates who have a distinct preference, whether they prefer a smaller or a larger firm. So we're having to interview for both in that situation. But I knew, and you were one of the examples where I came off the phone to you and I called Susan and I said, they're going to take Chip. I know they will.
And I'm the guy.
I'm always right with these things. So yeah. I'm glad it worked.
Yeah. In fact, I think I was out of the country on one of the calls that we had. So
yeah.
Susan, let me ask this question when it comes to, hiring mistakes that really impact, quality recruitment, but also potentially could increase risk for the company that's hiring. What are some of those mistakes that are made, again, not through the Dragonfly partners, but outside of the Dragonfly partners?
The biggest mistake that we see that also exposes the company is a lack of alignment before they even go out to market on a position. So what I mean by that is that oftentimes you have got a distinct hiring manager for a role, but then there are lots of other individuals that are collaborating with that position or have some input on the roles, level of responsibility, scope of work itself. And where we've seen exposure to issues occur have been when a candidate gets progressed all the way to, let's say, a panel or group stage interview, and then you realize that there's been a complete misalignment from one business unit to another within the organization about what the role is, what the core function of it is, and how it's expected to operate. And there can be fallout from that. You can lose really, really good talent. You can open yourselves up to some quite big HR issues if you've got people involved in the interview process that maybe haven't been apprised on how to do that properly. So we always recommend, and we've actually pumped the brakes with companies several times before, that every stakeholder involved in that role needs to have seen, had input, and touched that final document as to what the role is before HR posts an advert or engages a recruiter or even before they say to the existing team, hey, do any of you know anybody for it? It keeps it tight, it keeps it measurable, it keeps it fair. And it also means that when a candidate gets offered, they're likely to accept. Whereas if you have this mess in the middle while they're trying to figure out what a role actually is, candidates can read that very, very quickly. And it makes an organization look like they've got communication issues, like they can't get on the same page, like it's going to be hard to make a decision. And if it's like that during an interview process, what's it like when you work there? And I think a lot of companies do forget that the interview, the candidate is assessing whether you're an organization that they want to work with as well. It's a two-way street. It's not just a selection process for the client. And we always say to candidates, this is your opportunity to find out whether this is a seat that you could be happy in and, have a long career in.
Excellent. We have 2 more segments and then we'll close out this coatings talk. Are you both still good on time?
Yes.
Perfect. I love asking that question because I haven't had anybody say no. I have to go right now.
Could be a bit awkward.
It could be awkward, huh?
I've just pushed my meeting back down.
I want to focus now. The 2 areas that we're going to focus on, the first is going to be on the executive search perspective. And then I want you next in that final segment to talk about practical, guidance for job seekers. But when it comes to the executive search perspective, when we look at leaders, what's really needed to be successful today when it comes to that? Because you are out there, you're looking for executives too. And so for those people who are going to be leaders, executives, what do they need to have to be successful? What's the top number one thing? And you both can share your perspectives on that.
I'd say emotional intelligence is the top thing. If you're looking at now a group of candidates who are judging their next move by flexibility, being heard, being understood, being autonomous, you need a leader that also is able to display those values and really, I guess, bring the best out of people now in that post-pandemic era. So I think emotional intelligence is massive. I also think that, in terms of what they need to be able to do and what makes a good leader, it's their ability to manage more diverse teams, because people are diverse now. And I think not that they've never have been, but I think there's been much more of a focus on that. And we all know that the more diverse a team is, the more successful they are. So I think it's a manager that's able to manage multiple different people, multiple different personalities, multiple different levels. And also I think what makes a good leader is somebody that has been in their shoes and understands where they're at now and where they want to be. So those are the things that I would say are crucial in leadership at the moment.
And Susan?
Yeah, I completely agree with Amy in terms of how what the expectations of a Gen Z are versus a boomer has really impacted how you lead and the type of executive leadership that companies are putting in place. But I would just also say that individuals need to be credible. We've not seen a ton of success, honestly, where people have been plucked from one industry and have gone in at an exec level. It works really well to parlay your skills at a mid-career level to make a move, but for somebody to really do well and to get the workforce behind them, we've seen very, very limited success when it has been somebody that hasn't had that credibility within the actual industry. And particularly coatings, it's small, it's chock full of people that are clever and know their stuff. You need to be able to sit in a room with those individuals and understand them in order to lead them. It's Yeah. So I think the emotional intelligence is huge, as Amy said, but I think that credibility and actual experience within the sector is absolutely key. We've just not seen it work any other way.
Mm. And Susan, you used the word boomer, which I am far too young to be a boomer.
Too young.
Really far young, too young. And you bring up a good point, especially related to coatings and corrosion. I've seen a lot of people that were near or at, or even a lot that were over retirement. When pandemic hit, they decided I'm done. I'm going to hang it up. And we've seen a drain happen in experience and also knowledge when it came to products and materials and applications and all that kind of stuff like that. You know, right now you're out there, you're working with so many different clients and like I say, coatings and corrosion, whatever industries that they're looking to hire. You know, when it comes to succession planning, you know, how important is that for long-term business resilience?
I don't think it's important. I think it's essential. There's without succession planning, where are you? I think it's a massive core strategic focus of the majority of companies that we work with in the space. I also think that if you speak to executive leadership teams, it's the one thing that they're losing sleep over at night. Yeah. Particularly here in the US versus a lot of other countries, talent can leave with 2 weeks notice. You know, it's absolute craziness, you know, from their perspective. They can pour years worth of knowledge into you and just have you walk out within 2 weeks of that institutional knowledge. It takes longer than that to get a recruitment project underway. So you're nearly always in a situation where you can't even get the data dump that's required for anybody new. So we're definitely seeing that as being a core issue. And another one, you know, if we revisit some of the generational stuff, is unfortunately the generation that's departing were like jobs for lifers, right? If you treated them well and gave them like reviews and you did what you said you were going to do, they would sit and they would run through a wall for you in order to get it done. The younger generation now has not been afforded much stability in their work and career. They know that the likelihood is that even if they poured that level of commitment into a company, it wouldn't in this day and age necessarily be returned to them. So you see them being much more susceptible to, hey, well, I'm going to always keep an ear to the ground. I'm going to continuously network even when I'm happy and well taken care of, and I'm going to build a career that looks more like a portfolio of projects rather than looking to just stay within one organization and work my way up. And executives, when they're taking succession planning into account, need to account for that mindset shift, because the individual that's sat right here now, you can't give them a carrot on a stick that's 5 years from now. That's just, they're not going to stay the 5 years to wait for that to happen. You need to put building blocks in place. You need to be engaging with them. They need to be working on projects that they feel to be meaningful. They need to feel that they're developing and growing their skill set. And they want way more consistent feedback on a much more regular basis than the annual review that was in place before. So that's, sorry, I ranted there a little bit, but I feel very strongly about succession.
No, I love it, because in a way, the Dragonfly partners and both of you, you're more about risk mitigation for your clients when it comes to strategically hiring. But I think a lot of times with companies, you know, you're sometimes companies view, oh, we've got to adjust our end of the year, we're going to let people go. And they think of it more as an employee, and you're hiring somebody. You need to think about it. I think a lot of companies, big and small, need to really think about the strategic opportunities they have if they were hiring the right candidates. But succession planning, to your point, especially here in the United States, a lot of times it's like, we lost our VP of this and we got to replace that. If you don't have anybody that's in that progression that could potentially go into that, that can be a problem, right? I'm not saying that a recruiter can't, like yourself, you can't find that person. But I'm saying is, I think working in conjunction with like a firm like yourselves in these companies, it's a great way for them to make sure that they have the proper alignment when it comes to succession, but also too that they are strategically covered with positions so that if they're looking to grow or maybe launch a new product or whatever, that it's all part of a larger strategy than just, oh, well, we need to hire somebody. Let's reach out to Amy and Susan, right?
Yeah. And that comes down to employer brand as well. If you're consistently hiring above your current workforce, you're going to keep losing them. So, I mean, it is one of the first things we ask on an intake call is there anybody that could be ready for this role within the next year or so? And if not, why not? And it really helps give us a sense of the organization. And ultimately, if we are going out to market for an executive, some of the issues that they're going to have to work to fix.
Yeah.
Nice. So our final segment, I want to talk a little bit of some practical, guidance for those people who are out there seeking jobs. Recently I have a friend of mine in the industry that actually have several friends in the industry that are looking, and some have been very successful in getting things lined up, and things look great. Momentum's going in the right direction with some really good potential employers for themselves. But as you're working with professionals, or you're basically offering some, let's say, free advice out there, how can professionals position themselves for advancement or potentially moving into executive roles? Is there any key aspect that they need to focus on?
You go.
With me this time. Okay, so in terms of candidates that are out in the market that are trying to position themselves for these roles, I do always bring it back to think of yourself as an asset, not as an employee. So really consider what value are you bringing to the organization, and quantify it. So things like your LinkedIn profile, I want to see facts and figures on there. Like, people will be grabbed by that. They'll be interested in that. That will give them an immediate understanding. I always use a project manager analogy, right? You could be project managing something that's, a $10 project or a $5 billion project, and no one would know the difference if you just write project manager on your LinkedIn profile. So really keep things quantifiable, qualify your experience, give that information out, like what has the scope of the projects been that you've worked on? What's the average deal value? If you work in, let's say you work in accounts receivables, did you make any process improvements that then resulted in, an average debtor day reduction? Just if you give numbers, people will like that and they'll be drawn to it. I also don't sleep on your own network. We are recruiters. We're very good at what we do, but people come to us when they have exhausted the other possibilities. And that is the network. The vast majority of individuals are going to find their next role through their current existing network, both personal and professional, not through responding to an advert. It's harder and harder with some of the AI automations that are happening in ATS systems. So that's another thing. I would engage really thoroughly with my network so that they knew that I was looking for work. They knew the scope that I was interested in, and they were representing me well out in the market too. I would join industry groups for the exact same reason. Somebody might mention in an industry group, well, we're passively looking for this, and this. You're in. You've already got the skill set that they're looking for. And then if you do have to respond to an ad, be proactive. So put your hat in the ring, but then maybe you want to go connect with people that are within that organization on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm highly interested in your organization. Yeah. I've applied for a role. Can you point me in the right direction? there's a lot of things that you need to do these days, unfortunately, in order to just increase your visibility, because there's a lot of noise.
Yeah, the visibility.
Yeah, so it's tricky. Everybody is their own marketing manager, and you have to function as your own recruiter. Unfortunately, companies like Amy and I, we are headhunters. We are going out on behalf of the client to find them exactly what they need. So we're not in a position a lot of the time, to find a job seeker multiple roles. It's on the job seeker to really be their own marketing manager on that front. And some of the best mechanisms we see for that are LinkedIn, having a really robust profile there, joining good groups, and engaging with your own network.
Yeah.
Excellent. And Amy, let me ask you this, as a recruiter out there, what are you looking for related to, people conducting interviews with you? Maybe they're showcasing their portfolios, or, what their career narratives are. What are you looking for from those candidates?
I think we're looking for the same things all the time. So it's tenure in positions. A lot of clients do not, and no one likes somebody that's hopped multiple times throughout their career. So good tenure, we're talking at least three plus years at one company before they've moved. If they haven't moved companies, we want to see that they've progressed through that particular company that they're at, but with promotions and increased responsibility. So we want to see a progression, no matter what that looks like. I think the other thing that we want to see is candidates that are not just relying on their work experience to get them opportunities and to make them an asset. So like Susan says, are they doing extracurricular things? Are they, you're an amazing example of this, Jem. You're very visible, you're very present, you've got lots of things that are, like marketable about you, and so are you sitting on boards for AMP? Are you involved in different chapter groups? Are you involved in different clubs, societies? Are you out there networking with people? Are you visible? Are you seen? So those are the things that we want to look for, because then when we float a candidate name by a company, they say, oh yeah, I know who that is. He's a big deal in the industry. So those are the things that I think we're looking for. And I think flexibility is key as well. Somebody that's open to listening to something new, who says yes to things, and as a personal development mechanism, and who is open to opportunities to grow their own, career development.
Great. That's great. So let's talk about the Dragonfly partners are exhibiting at the AMP 2026 Houston conference that's coming up next week. Can you talk a little bit about your exhibit space and what you'll be doing during the AMP conference?
We're excited. It's our first time exhibiting. So we've been attendees before, but this is our first rodeo, as it were, of having our own booth. So we would love it if people wanted to stop by and say a quick hello.
What booth number?
I knew you were going to ask that.
I'll post it. I'll post it in the chat. Don't worry.
Yeah, that would have been really useful for the purposes of this conversation, Jen.
Don't worry about it. It's not a problem. No, but I'll definitely put that. I'll put that in the comments.
We'll have a big Dragonfly logo behind us, so there's no missing us.
Can't miss you guys.
Miss it. Yeah.
So it's great that you're going to be there exhibiting. It's a good opportunity for again, small emerging companies, large companies, multinational, international companies, professionals that are looking for maybe that next step, that next opportunity. Make sure you connect with Amy and Susan at the AMP conference. So
thank you. Looking forward to meeting everybody.
Yeah. Now, the question I always ask everybody, is there anything we didn't cover or talk about that either one of you would want to leave with this beautiful audience we have?
It's a good question.
I feel like we covered everything and some with you,
We
Jen.
did, didn't we?
I think one of the things that we would like to say is, if even if you're not directly hiring right now, or you're not directly looking for a role, we're always open to connecting and networking and discussing, because this is our space. We love it. We know it. We are always keen to share our perspective on what we're seeing in the industry. So a lot of clients will call us just to say, look, what are you seeing on the ground at the moment? What does that look like? What do we need to be looking for if we're kind of building a talent pool? And it's just about building those relationships where then we know, okay, we know that this client, talking about what Susan was talking about with regards to succession planning, they're going to be in need of these types of individuals. So it's always good to form that relationship, so that if we see any of those types of people come across our desk and we want to make that introduction, that it's possible.
Yeah, I think I throw it back to don't think about the aspect of recruiters or headhunters, risk mitigation. I think that's a perfect way to really view it for companies. And your website, what's your website?
We're www.thedragonflypartners.com.
Everyone check them out.
We drive a lot of our communications via LinkedIn. So anyone can feel free to connect with either one of us, particularly if they are a job seeker, actually, as well. You know, we can definitely, we're pretty well networked. So if anybody needs any assistance on that front.
Wonderful. Susan, thank you so much. Amy, thank you so much. I appreciate finally having you guys on Coatings Talk.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I'd keep it open to come back again. So, you know, maybe there's some things that, hey, Jim, there's this trend that's happening, maybe a new TikTok craze or something like that. Feel free to come on, because, I think when it comes down to it, this community really wants to learn a lot about, again, what opportunities are out there. And they also want to understand, how they could, maybe execute on those opportunities and take advantage of another, the next step in their career, or advancing themselves in the two industries that they might work in, coatings or corrosion. So thank you both.
Thank you, Jim. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in on another Coatings Talk. Please like this episode. Also, too, do me a favor. Once the broadcast ends, please hit that share and share this message with other colleagues or individuals out there that are in need of watching this interview that I had with both Susan and Amy. And I'd like to say for everyone to have a good rest of your evening, your night, or morning, no matter where in the world you're watching this broadcast. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.